Lillian Hart stood on the dirt floor of a shack carved into a Wyoming hillside, staring at the man she had agreed to marry. His boots were cracked and held together with a piece of twine. His coat was stained with mud and oil. Nothing about him looked safe, rich, or promising. In that moment, Lillian thought she had traded one prison for another. She did not know that the rough hands pouring her coffee controlled the most valuable land in the territory. She did not know the shack she hated was the last wall standing before a war that could burn the West to the ground. The rain in Boston never washed anything clean. It only made the dirt stick harder. In the fall of 1875, Lillian Hart walked fast along Wharf Street, her threadbare coat pulled tight around her thin frame. The city was still choking from the financial panic. Shops were closed. Men begged in doorways. For Lillian, fear had a name: Tobias Crowley. Crowley was not a banker. Bankers used paper and laws. Crowley used men. He had lent her father money for the tailoring shop, $2,000. When business failed, the debt remained. Her father died 3 months earlier, his heart giving out under the weight of fear. The debt passed to Lillian, a seamstress earning pennies. She clutched a folded newspaper clipping in her pocket as if it could shield her. When she turned a corner and saw one of Crowley's collectors waiting near her boarding house, she did not hesitate. She ran. She ducked into an alley and pulled out the clipping, reading it again by weak daylight. Wanted. Wife must be strong and honest. Life is hard. Solitude is complete. I offer a roof and protection. No luxuries promised. Jeremiah Holt. Blackwater Ridge, Wyoming Territory. It was the bleakest proposal she had ever seen, but one word had saved her: protection. She spent her last savings on a telegraph message and a train ticket. Jeremiah Holt's replies were short and cold. He sent money for a third-class ticket and one instruction: come alone, tell no one. The train ride west felt like shedding skin. Brick cities gave way to endless plains. By the time she stepped onto the wooden platform at Cheyenne, her dress was stained with soot and her body ached with exhaustion. Lillian Hart. The voice was deep and rough. She turned and saw him. Jeremiah Holt was tall and broad, his shoulders blocking the sun. A dark beard hid most of his face. His coat was old. His boots were worn nearly through. One was tied with twine to keep the sole from flapping. Her heart sank. This was the man she had married with ink and paper. A poor man, a broken man. "Mr. Holt?" she asked. He nodded once and lifted her single battered bag as if it weighed nothing. "Wagons this way." They rode for hours without speaking. Wyoming stretched wide and empty around them. The land was beautiful and cruel at the same time. As night fell, the cold sank into her bones. Without a word, Jeremiah tossed her a thick wool blanket. It smelled of smoke and horse, but it was warm. When they finally arrived, Lillian's breath caught. The home was not a house. It was a sod hut dug into the hill. Logs and dirt formed the walls. A small barn leaned nearby like it might collapse at any moment. "This is it," Jeremiah said. Inside was one room, a stove, a table, a bed covered in furs. The floor was packed earth. Lillian felt tears burn her eyes. This was worse than she had imagined. Jeremiah left her stew on the stove and went to tend the horse. Alone, she ate in silence. The food was good, too good. As she looked around, things did not add up. The table was rough, but one chair was fine mahogany, old but carefully made. On a shelf were books, real books, philosophy, science, Shakespeare. When Jeremiah returned, she was holding one. "You read?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I didn't expect this." "Books don't cost much to keep," he replied. She looked at the heavy iron bolt on the door. "And this?" His eyes hardened. "There are wolves in these hills, and worse things. You wanted protection. This is it. No questions." She agreed, though unease settled deep in her chest. That night, she noticed a thick gold ring on a chain around his neck. Too heavy for a poor man. The next morning, Jeremiah was gone. A note said he was checking the perimeter. Curious and uneasy, Lillian stepped outside and walked to the barn. Inside, the space felt wrong, too short. She pulled aside stacked hay and froze. Behind it was a black steel vault door. Her heart pounded. Beneath it, a hidden trapdoor lay under dust. She opened it and climbed down. What she found was not a cellar. It was a command room. Maps covered the walls. Survey charts, rock samples, a telegraph machine, ledgers filled with numbers too large to understand. At the center was a map marked in red and blue. One note stood out: Blackwater Aquifer. Deed holder, Jeremiah Holt. Water, the most valuable thing in the West. You weren't supposed to see this. Jeremiah's voice echoed from above. He stood at the ladder, his face grim. You're not poor, Lillian whispered. No, he said quietly. I'm dangerous. And at that moment, Lillian understood. She had not married a starving rancher. She had married the man holding the West by its throat. Jeremiah Holt climbed down into the hidden room and shut the trapdoor behind him. The sound of the lock echoed through the underground chamber. Lillian stood frozen, her heart racing, surrounded by maps, ledgers, and secrets that did not belong to a poor rancher. I told you not to ask questions, Jeremiah said, not angry, but tired. I didn't ask, Lillian replied. I found answers. Jeremiah studied her for a long moment, as if weighing a risk. Finally, he sighed and leaned against the table covered in maps. I was a surveyor for the Union Pacific, he said. 5 years ago, I found the aquifer that feeds this valley, the only one. I bought the deed before anyone understood its value. Lillian's eyes moved back to the map. Red marks covered nearly all the land around them, stamped with one name: Caleb Sterling. He owns everything else, Lillian said quietly. He thinks he does, Jeremiah replied. But water decides who lives and who starves. And the water starts here. Jeremiah explained how Sterling had tried to buy him out, first politely, then with threats. When that failed, barns burned and shots were fired into the night. Jeremiah learned to live small and look poor. Poverty was camouflage. I needed a wife, he said, not for comfort, for law. A married man can claim more land. It locks the ridge. It keeps Sterling from taking the source. Lillian felt the weight of his words settle over her. So, I'm a legal shield.
No, Jeremiah said firmly.
You're my partner. I just didn't expect you to be this brave. Before she could answer, the sound of hooves echoed from the valley below. Jeremiah stiffened. We need supplies, he said, and you need to see him. They rode into town that afternoon. Jeremiah made her wear her oldest dress and brushed dust onto the hem. He slouched in the wagon, playing the part of a beaten man. Blackwater Ridge was split in two. One side was tents and shacks. The other was brick buildings and white paint. At the center stood the Sterling Hotel, tall and proud, like a throne. Inside the general store, people watched them with pity. Then the door opened. Caleb Sterling entered like he owned the air itself. Gray suit, silver cane, a smile that never reached his eyes. Well, Sterling said smoothly, the hermit has a bride. His gaze slid over Lillian, slow and invasive. Jeremiah stayed quiet, head lowered. Sterling offered money again. $50,000. Enough to buy a city life. Jeremiah refused. Sterling leaned closer. You're a stain on progress, he hissed. Then he lifted Lillian's chin with his cane. I prefer the dirt. Lillian said sharply, It's cleaner. The store fell silent. Sterling laughed, but anger flashed in his eyes. Winter is coming, he said. And so is the railroad. You'll beg before the snow melts. They left quickly. Jeremiah's jaw was tight. He knows you're not weak, he said. That makes you dangerous. That night, Jeremiah placed a rifle in Lillian's hands. If he comes, he said, we fight. The first snow arrived like an attack. For days, Jeremiah trained her how to shoot, how to reload, how to breathe through fear. Her shoulder bruised, her hands shook, but she learned. Then the attack came. Fire bottles smashed through the windows. Bullets tore through the walls. Smoke filled the shack. Jeremiah pushed Lillian toward the back. Run to the barn. Instead, she raised the rifle. She fired once. Then again. Her shot dropped a man holding a torch. Jeremiah used the chaos, firing with deadly precision. The attackers fled, but not before Jeremiah fell, blood soaking his side. She dragged him to the barn, into the bunker. As the shack burned above them, the world thought Jeremiah Holt was dead. In the bunker, Lillian stitched his wound with steady hands. She used skills learned from sewing dresses to save his life. When he slept, she found the telegraph. She sent one message, then another. Help. Blackwater Ridge. Holt down. Hours later, the machine answered. Hold fast. Dutch is coming. Days passed underground. Lillian read the ledgers. She understood the truth. Jeremiah was not just holding water. He held railroad power. Sterling's empire was built on debt and fear. When Dutch Van Doren arrived with armed men, the plan was set. Lillian would carry the proof. As gunfire echoed above and Jeremiah held the bunker, Lillian rode the river in freezing water, chased by death and time. She reached the train just as it pulled away and handed the maps to the conductor. Back at Blackwater Ridge, Sterling returned to finish the job. Instead, he found marshals. The land was lost. The water was secured. Sterling was dragged away screaming. Jeremiah emerged wounded but alive. In the ashes of the burned shack, he placed a heavy gold ring on Lillian's finger. The war was over, but the legend of Blackwater Ridge had only just begun. The snow did not stop falling after Sterling was taken away. It covered the burned remains of the sod house like a burial cloth. Lillian stood beside Jeremiah as the marshals led Caleb Sterling down the valley in chains. The man who had ruled the territory with fear did not look powerful anymore. He looked small, broken, finished. Jeremiah swayed on his feet. Blood loss and pain were catching up to him. Lillian wrapped his arm around her shoulders and held him upright. She had crossed half a continent to escape danger, only to walk straight into war, and somehow she had survived it. They did not rebuild the sod house. For weeks they lived out of the bunker while the snow piled high outside. Word spread fast through the valley. Sterling's debts were called in. His land was seized. Men who had once feared him now spoke his name with relief. Farmers came quietly to Blackwater Ridge, removing their hats, thanking Jeremiah for holding the water when no one else could. Jeremiah never acted like a king. He simply nodded and listened. When spring came, the railroad survey crews arrived. This time, they did not threaten or bargain. They brought papers and respect. The southern route was approved. Tracks would run through the valley, fed by the Blackwater Aquifer. With the railroad came a town. The burned shack was replaced by a solid timber house, then another building, then a school, a church, a real general store. Lillian watched Blackwater Ridge grow from the porch, her hands no longer raw from fear but busy with plans. She did not sit idle. Lillian organized supply ledgers, negotiated prices, and wrote letters east with a sharp, steady hand. Merchants learned quickly that Jeremiah Holt owned the land, but Lillian Hart Holt ran the future. One evening, 3 years after the fire, Jeremiah stood behind her on the porch of their finished home. Below them stretched a busy rail town, smoke rising from chimneys, lanterns glowing along the street. "I thought I married a man with nothing," Lillian said softly. "And I thought I married a woman who needed hiding." They both laughed, the sound easy and earned. Jeremiah took her hand. The gold ring still rested on her finger, worn now, scratched by work and weather. It no longer felt like a secret. It felt like truth. Lillian Hart had come west running from debt and fear. She found neither wealth nor power waiting for her. She built them. And in the Wild West, where men fought with guns and land, it was a woman with courage, patience, and a plan who claimed the future. Because she did not just marry the king of the frontier,